Well, let's dive in. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the Beatles and how it really evolved at Abbey Road. I love in the section in the documentary where it talks about how when they first came in, they didn't think they were very good.
Well, that's the thing. It was so interesting because, in a way, George Martin's like, oh, they weren't very good. And it was like they were a live band who had just been sort of out gigging and they weren't used to recording. So when they walked in, and also what's funny is that George Martin, I hadn't realized, was looking for like a lead act like Cliff Richards at the beginning. He's like, which one's Cliff and which one's the Shadows? He hadn't sort of realized the four of them came together as a package.
Yeah, it's very funny. And they were essentially sort of street buskers, right?
Well, they were a live act who hadn't really recorded. So
Yeah.
And also what was really interesting was I hadn't, what I wanted to highlight in showing that as well is when they came there, people would come and they would do like an audition. So they sort of just play, and I think they were really nervous. They just played all the tracks that they would usually play at a concert, and then sort of all a bit rushed. And then George Martin sort of had to, as a producer, sort of take that apart and sort of put his arm around them and show them the recording process. But also it was then recording sections were done in 3-hour slots. It was very different. It was like you arrived at the studio, you were well rehearsed, you played the songs, they would mix the songs, then you'd have a break, then you'd do another song. So, they recorded their first album in one day over those 3-hour sessions. And then as they grew as artists and in confidence, they had unlimited space, had unlimited hours, and they kind of changed how recording was worked within the Abbey Road space. So I kind of learned that through directing this documentary.
Yeah. One of the stories I love was when they talk about the creation of A Day in the Life. I thought that was really interesting. So talk a little bit about what you uncovered in this documentary about how they created. I love the idea of taking a single song and sort of dissecting how it evolved in this space and the different elements come together. Tell us a little bit of that story.
Well, I love that story because it also, I thought it was a good one because also it's like, which songs do the Beatles recorded all their albums except for one there. It's like, which songs do we include in the documentary? But that one was always on my list because it's such a great song, but also it utilizes Studio 2, but then it also has the orchestral orgasm, as they call it in the interviews. So it sort of utilizes all of the space of Abbey Road. And also it's a funny story how they like go from the lowest note all the way up to the top. And so it was and I also, what was great was we were able to get hold of the original Beatles master tape. So then I was able to have Giles Martin and interview him, sort of showing, so you could isolate, listen to the orchestra, listen to the vocals and isolate everything to sort of really show the process of how that recording came about. But and we had that great footage of them in Studio One when they were recording that day. So
yeah. And how did they come up with the idea for the anticlimax at the end?
It sounds like it's that thing of like, how do you end anything? It's always that big thing, isn't it? Like with the documentary, I was like, how do I end the documentary? On your mind. And it's really funny. I didn't know. It's sort of like they were all going and just using their vocals. And then there's that beautiful bit in the documentary of Ringo's like, oh, and then we all got the pianos and we played in unison. So it's quite a funny section, isn't it? But also it's quite exciting because it's such a strong song to be able to sort of, as you say, dissect it and show how the layers that sort of go together to make it what it is, and that it is very much based and found its home in Abbey Road. It sort of worked perfectly for what I needed.
Yeah, and then you uncovered all this stuff about Elton, which I thought was really really funny and his bits were really great in there.
Well, yeah, because I didn't know. I was sort of like, look, I want to show session musicians. And so I was like, okay, session musicians, who were session musicians there? And they were like, Elton John and Jimmy Page. And I was like, okay, that'll do me. That's so, and then we found out that he'd played on He Ain't Heavy, and we've managed to isolate the recording so you can actually hear his piano on it, which for me is like quite a special moment because you really can tell it's really his style.
Yeah, and Elton says in your documentary that he was quite intimidated.
Yeah,
when he went
the smell of fear. I mean, that was the thing, because it was like in the early 60s, and he wasn't in a band. He was
Red.
He was Reginald Dwight. He was writing songs, and he was a session musician, and he was getting extra money to buy records and clothes through being a session musician. So he had no idea that he was going to become a solo artist in his own right. He didn't have those ambitions then, but he was really relaxed and really great in the interview. And I think he was keen to tell the story of how much Abbey Road inspired him, and how working with the talent that was recording at Abbey Road really made him up his game and really educated him into the artist he became. But also he was funny because he was like, look, you know, your dad, I was there recording one day, and your dad just sort of nosed his way, like came into the studio and played, do you want to hear the new song I'm doing? I'll Let It Be. So I think he just he liked reminiscing about those days. I think he was keen to do that. So
yeah,
it was a special moment.
Yeah, it was. It's a side of him you don't really see. So I thought that was really nice.
Thanks for watching the You Interview channel. With over 3,000 original celebrity videos, we have one of the largest collections of celebrity interviews anywhere. So remember to like and comment on our videos and subscribe to the channel. If you want to get more involved, you can become a member of the channel. Membership has its perks. You can see exclusive celebrity videos and get the opportunity to ask our celebrity guests questions. We can't wait to hear from you.